Welcome, everyone, to Revenge Blaze, the channel dedicated to powerful stories of betrayal, family drama, justice served, and life-changing consequences. Thank you so much for joining us today. We truly appreciate every one of you who stops by to hear these tales of truth and accountability. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Stick around, don't leave just yet, because the next story is gripping, full of twists and incredibly satisfying. You won't want to miss it. And without keeping you waiting any longer, here is today's story. Abandoned mom at the station to take the mother-in-law. They didn't know it was a train of doom. I am Sheila Vance, and at 65 I believed I had finally earned the right to a little peace, a measure of loyalty, and a seat at the head of my family's table. I spent 40 years as a federal judge presiding over cases where greed and betrayal were commonplace, yet I never expected to encounter those same poisons within my own flesh and blood. Today was intended to be the crowning jewel of my retirement, a luxury journey through the high desert majesty of Joshua Tree. I had purchased every single ticket, every VIP pass, and every gourmet meal for what I believed was a family celebration. But as the desert wind began to howl outside the station, my daughter Gillian handed me a cold, calculated reality. She stood there, flanked by her husband Bradley and his mother Martha, and looked me in the eye without a shred of remorse. "We gave your ticket to Martha," she announced, her voice as dry as the Mojave sand. "The kids love her more. And frankly, at your age, this heat would simply be a burden." Bradley didn't even look up. He merely nodded in silent agreement, shielding his mother's stolen seat with his shoulder. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow, a sharp, icy realization that they saw me as nothing more than an open checkbook with a fading pulse. They expected me to simply nod, hand over the remaining documents, and disappear, while they enjoyed the luxury I provided. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I stood there in the stifling heat of the platform, clutching my leather briefcase, and watched them prepare to board the train they had turned into their own undoing. They thought they were leaving me behind, but they had no idea that I was the one about to pull the rug out from under their entire existence. A minute later, I made a single phone call that ensured their dream vacation would turn into a total disaster before the sun hit the horizon. They were about to learn that when you betray a woman who knows every loophole in the law, you don't just lose a seat, you lose everything. Friends, before we reveal the shocking details of how this family's greed led to their complete collapse, I have a small request. If you believe that respect for our elders is non-negotiable and that justice should always be served, please subscribe to the channel and hit the like button right now. Your support allows me to share these powerful stories of truth and consequence. Also, leave a comment below telling me which city you are listening from. I love seeing how far these lessons of life travel. Now let's get back to the moment the desert turned cold for those who chose betrayal over blood. The air in Moynihan Train Hall was thick with the scent of overpriced espresso and the frantic energy of travelers, but within the small invisible radius around me, everything had turned to ice. Standing there, watching Gillian adjust her sunglasses with that practiced, dismissive air she inherited from her father, I realized that my years on the bench had prepared me for many things, but not for the sheer audacity of my own daughter. She didn't even have the decency to look ashamed as she took the gold-leafed VIP envelope, the one I had paid for with 4 decades of integrity, and handed it to Martha like a sacrificial offering. Bradley stood there like a decorative houseplant, nodding with a synchronized rhythm that made me wonder if he had any spine left at all. Martha, on the other hand, was already preening her fingers adorned with tacky, oversized rings, jingling as she clutched the ticket I had intended for my own birthday celebration. In the courtroom, I was known for my iron silence, a particular type of quiet that made even the most hardened criminals sweat. It wasn't a silence of weakness, it was the silence of a predator calculating the exact moment to strike. As I looked at them, my daughter, my son-in-law, and the woman who had effectively replaced me, I felt that familiar cold clarity wash over me. I didn't scream, and I certainly didn't cry. Crying is for those who lack options, and as a former federal judge, my options were etched in the very statutes of the state of New York. I simply nodded a brief, jerky movement of my chin that Gillian probably took for senile acceptance. She gave me a pat on the shoulder, the kind you'd give a loyal pet, and turned back to her entourage. Thanks for being so understanding, Mom. We'll send you plenty of photos of the desert sunsets. You just head home and put your feet up. She chirped her mind already on the luxury sleeper car and the vintage champagne I had pre-ordered. I watched their backs as they moved toward the boarding gate, Martha's loud laughter echoing off the vaulted ceilings. She was wearing a leopard print scarf that looked like it had been wrestled off a confused feline, swaying her hips as if she were the queen of the Mojave. It was a pathetic display of unearned triumph. I remembered when Gillian was 10. I had stayed up until 3 in the morning helping her with a school project, only for her to tell the teacher that her father did all the work because Mom is always too busy. Even then, the seeds of this entitlement were being watered by her father's constant indulgence. He had consistently prioritized her whims over my efforts, teaching her that my role was to provide the stage while she played the star. Well, the theater was about to go dark, and I was the only one with the keys to the circuit breaker. Turning on my heel, I didn't head for the street. Instead, I walked with a steady rhythmic gait toward a quiet alcove near the business lounge. Every step felt like a gavel striking a mahogany desk. I reached into my leather briefcase and pulled out my encrypted phone, the one I used for private matters that required executive discretion. I scrolled past the grandkids folder and tapped on the name Arthur. Arthur wasn't just my attorney. He was the man who had helped me navigate the complex trusts I had set up for a family that clearly didn't deserve them. The phone rang twice before a gravelly, familiar voice answered. Sheila, you should be halfway to the desert by now. Arthur. I said, my voice as flat as a sentencing transcript. Change of plans. The golden parachute protocol we discussed. We're skipping the warnings and going straight to execution. I want the hammer to drop before they hit the first stop in Pennsylvania. There was a brief pause. Arthur knew me too well to ask if I was sure. He had seen the way they treated me, whispering about my declining sharpness while asking for bridge loans to cover Bradley's mounting debts. I assume they did something remarkably stupid, Arthur asked. They gave my ticket to Martha Arthur, in front of the twins. They told me I was a burden. Gillian thought because she held the physical vouchers she was in control. She forgot who signed the checks for the underlying assets. Understood, Arthur said. The silver SUV Bradley is driving is registered to your LLC Vance Holdings. I'll initiate a repossession immediately. Since he's traveling, I'll have the vehicle towed from the station, parking within the hour. As for the Manhattan apartment, the lease is in your name. I'll draft the 30-day notice and notify management that you are withdrawing your guarantee for all utilities as of noon today. Do more, Arthur, I interrupted. The luxury glamping site at Joshua Tree invoke the primary member presence clause. Tell them that since I am not present, the reservation is void. If they want to stay, they'll have to pay the walk-in rate on their own cards, which are all linked to the sub-accounts I manage. Consider it done. I'll also trigger the audit on Bradley's car dealership. Since he failed to provide transparency reports, we'll freeze his business accounts for investigation. He won't be able to buy a pack of gum by the time that train hits the state line. Perfect, I said. And Arthur, call the private school. Tell them the tuition for the next semester will no longer be coming from my trust. Gillian wants to be an independent woman. She can start by figuring out how to pay $30,000 a year for Leo and Mia's education. I hung up and tucked the phone away. I felt a fleeting moment of pity for the twins, but I remembered how Gillian had coached them to say, Grandma Martha is the fun one, right before they boarded. Loyalty is taught, and Gillian had taught them that love was a commodity. I walked out of the station and into the bright New York sun. I wasn't going home. I was going to the Carlisle for an expensive lunch and a bottle of Sancerre that didn't have to be shared with anyone who considered me a burden. As the yellow cab pulled away, I looked at the shimmering skyline. For years, I had built a fortress of security around my children. I realized now I had only built a cage of gold for myself. The train was speeding west carrying 3 adults who believed they had won. They were sipping champagne, laughing at my expense. They had no idea that back in the city the invisible strings of their lives were being cut. My blood pressure was lower than it had been in years. There is no medicine like the realization that you no longer have to set yourself on fire to keep ungrateful people warm. I checked my watch. In exactly 45 minutes, the train would enter a tunnel where service was spotty. By the time they emerged, Bradley's phone would explode with alerts, and Gillian would find her unlimited credit line replaced by a permanent zero. It was going to be a very long, very quiet trip to California. And for the first time, I was looking forward to the silence. The morning sun reflected off the sleek glass of the Upper East Side skyscrapers, casting long, sharp shadows. As the high-speed rail carried Gillian and her entourage away, I stood in front of my attorney's office feeling profound relief. It is peculiar how the mind works when it shifts from protect to liquidate. For years, I had carried the weight of Gillian's security. Today, I was here to cut the ropes. Inside the office, Arthur met me with a thick stack of folders. "The tow truck is already at the station, Sheila," he said. "Bradley's silver SUV is being winched onto a flatbed. By the time they reach the first stop, that car will be in an impound lot in Queens waiting for the auction house." I let out a dry laugh. Bradley loved that car more than most people. He spent Sundays polishing the rims, boasting about the custom interior he supposedly picked out. In reality, I had sat through the 4-hour negotiation and signed the title because his credit was non-existent. He was a valet for a vehicle he could never afford. "Let's ensure the repossession is filed under breach of verbal trust," I instructed. "I want his credit report to scream default for 7 years. But the car was only the appetizer. The main course was the 3-bedroom apartment on 84th Street. Gillian had spent 2 years redecorating it on my dime, tearing down walls and installing marble countertops while calling herself a self-made designer. She forgot she paid zero in rent, and that my signature was the only reason she was allowed to stay. "The termination of the lease is notarized," Arthur noted. "The locks will be changed by 5 p.m. I've sent a formal notice to her email stating her belongings will be moved to storage in New Jersey, if not retrieved, within 48 hours. I thought of Gillian's closet filled with designer bags I had purchased. She probably thought those walls were hers by divine right. She imagined returning from Joshua Tree to her sanctuary. Instead, she would return to a key that didn't turn. It was a harsh move, but as a judge, I knew justice is about restoring balance. She wanted to be the powerful woman who could dismiss her mother fine. It was time to experience the weight of real-world independence. While Arthur and I dismantled their lives, I checked Gillian's social media. She had posted 6 stories on Instagram. One showed Martha clinking champagne against the window. The caption read, "Finally a vacation with people who know how to have fun, #blessed #family first." The irony was thick enough to choke on. They were speeding toward a resort that didn't exist for them. The resort had already canceled their stay because my card was reported compromised for those transactions. In Joshua Tree, a last-minute luxury tent is cash only. Gillian's bank account had a balance of $400. "You know, Arthur," I said, "I spent 40 years listening to people lie. I saw families tear each other apart over silver spoons. I thought if I just gave them enough, they would love me. I didn't realize I was feeding sharks and expecting them to become dolphins." Arthur looked at me with sympathy. "Sheila, you were a mother. Mothers don't see sharks. But today, You're back to being a judge. And the judge knows a debt must be paid. We finalized the audit of Bradley's consulting firm. It was a shell company used to funnel my investments into his hobbies, golf resort fees, and vintage watches. I signed the paperwork to freeze the accounts for embezzlement investigation. Since I was the sole investor, I was the only one who could give him a lifeline, and I had just tied a knot in it. By the time I left, the sun was at its zenith. I took a walk toward Central Park. For the first time in a decade, my phone wasn't buzzing with Gillian's complaints. I stopped at a bistro and ordered a lobster roll. Across from me, a young mother held her crying toddler with fierce protection. I realized what I had lost. I hadn't lost a daughter. I had lost a fantasy. The real Gillian was on a train bragging about a lifestyle that was evaporating. I checked the Vance family group chat. It was flooded with Martha's blurry photos and Bradley's comments about the wine list. I didn't type a word. In 30 minutes, the train would stop in Philadelphia. That was where the automated alerts from the bank and the landlord would hit their phones. The trap wasn't in the desert. The trap was their arrogance. They thought I was a stationary object they could ignore. They forgot that even a landmark can fall, and when it does, it shatters everything in its path. I took a bite of my lunch and looked at the park. For the first time in 65 years, I was the only person I had to take care of. It was a beautiful feeling. The gentle hum of the express was a lullaby of luxury. Martha was loudly critiquing the Chardonnay, adjusting her leopard print pashmina. The twins were preoccupied with tablets. To any onlooker, they appeared to be a success story. They had no inkling the foundation beneath their feet had been liquidated. Gillian leaned back, glowing with self-satisfaction. "Mom actually took it better than I thought," she said. "She'll be much happier in her garden." Bradley chuckled. "She's a judge, Gil, but even judges have to retire. Martha actually appreciates the finer things." The waiter arrived with the bill for their champagne, nearly $800. Gillian handed over the platinum card with a flick of her wrist. A minute passed. The waiter returned, his smile gone. "I'm sorry, but the transaction was declined. Account suspended." Gillian frowned. "Impossible. Try it again. It's an unlimited line." The manager stepped forward. "I've tried 3 times. The bank has officially revoked authorization." "Do you have another form of payment?" Gillian shot a look at Bradley. "Bradley, use yours. This is ridiculous." Bradley handed over his business card. Another minute of silence. When the manager returned, he was holding a tablet. "Sir, this account has been frozen pending a forensic audit. The card is flagged, do not honor. I need a personal debit card or cash." "Audit?" Bradley's voice squeaked. "My mother is the primary shareholder. She wouldn't—" At that moment, the signal caught. A chorus of pings erupted. Bradley's screen lit up, unauthorized access detected. Towing service confirmed. Gillian's phone was worse. A voicemail from her building manager, Ms. Vance. "The primary lessee has terminated sponsorship. The locks are being changed. Your belongings are being inventoried." "She changed the locks," Gillian whispered, turning pale. "She's throwing us out." "Gil, look!" Bradley shouted. "The SUV. The GPS says it's being towed. She's taking everything." 2 Amtrak security officers entered the car. They walked directly to their table. "Mr. Bradley Vance, we've received notification regarding an emergency repossession order. You are in possession of corporate items reported as unauthorized usage. Furthermore, the payment for your tickets has been revoked. You are trespassing." The dining car manager stepped forward. "And there is the matter of the $800 bill. If you cannot settle it, we will detain you in Philadelphia for theft of services." Gillian looked around, seeing the judgmental gazes of other travelers. The humiliation was a physical weight. "This is a misunderstanding!" she shrieked. "My mother is a judge, will pay you." "Ma'am, unless you have a card that works, gather your things," the officer said. "We are pulling into 30th Street Station. You will disembark. If you resist, we will use restraints. Martha let out a sob. I told you, Gillian, I told you we should have been nicer. Now we're being kicked off like common troublemakers. The train began to slow the brakes, squealing like Gillian's internal state. The luxury and family-first fantasies were gone. They were no longer VIPs. They were just 5 people with expensive suitcases and no way to move them. As the doors hissed open, the cool air of the platform rushed in. The train had reached its first stop, and the consequences were only beginning. The dry heat of the Mojave hit them like a wall. There were no private shuttles, only a rusted bench and a vending machine. Martha was the first to succumb. I am not staying here, she shrieked. Bradley, look at my skin. I paid for a villa, not a sidewalk. Gillian stared at her mother-in-law. The fun grandma had vanished, replaced by a self-absorbed woman concerned about moisturizer while they were stranded. Martha, please. We need to focus. Bradley, call the shuttle. Bradley was frantically tapping his phone. I can't. There's no signal. The last text said the reservation was voided. Sheila called and reported the transaction as unauthorized. The name, Sheila Vance, hung in the air. Gillian realized now it wasn't a tantrum. It was a surgical strike. Sheila had systematically dismantled their lives. She's taking it all back, Gillian murmured. The house, the car, the tuition. She's making us pay for the seat. Martha let out a jagged laugh. Don't be dramatic. She's just trying to scare you. Bradley, find me shade. Get us to a 5-star hotel immediately. With what money? Martha, Bradley erupted. My accounts are frozen. We have $400 in cash and the nearest town is 20 miles away. The look Martha gave him was cold. Well, that sounds like a you problem. I didn't raise my daughter to be married to a man who can't provide. If I had known you were a puppet, I never would have encouraged this trip. Gillian watched in horror. The family dynamic where Martha was cool and Sheila was a burden was disintegrating. Martha wasn't a savior. She was a parasite. And Bradley was nothing more than a hollow shell. Stop it, Gillian screamed. Look at where we are. We are in the desert with no home because we made sure my mother was the only one who supported us. We alienated everyone else, and now the control is gone, and so is the life it bought. She realized now that Sheila Vance didn't just provide money, she provided the gravity that kept their world from spinning. Without her, they weren't a family. They were selfish strangers fighting over a rusted bench. Gillian felt a sharp memory of her mother saying, "Freedom isn't free. Someone always pays the bill." Gillian had chosen to wait for the crumbs. Now the crumbs were swept away. The true nature of the desert revealed itself, a place where only the strong survived, and Gillian realized she was dangerously weak. The orange glow of the sunset felt like the closing of a chapter. Bradley sat on the concrete staring at images sent by a security server. Photos of his car dealership yellow, seizure of assets tape stretched across the doors. A padlock secured the gate where his fleet used to sit. It's over, Gillian, Bradley wheezed. The dealership is gone. Sheila's legal team arrived with a sheriff's deputy to freeze everything. She's treating my career like a bad debt. Gillian was frantically redialing Sheila's number. Each call went to an automated greeting. Pick up, Mom, she screamed. We're sorry. You can't just leave your daughter here. I'll report you, I swear. She listened to the silence. Sheila wasn't just ignoring them. She had erased them. They were failed investments whose accounts had been settled. Martha was meticulously counting cash in her wallet, her back turned. Don't look at me, Bradley. I have my own expenses. If you were a real businessman, you would have had a fund instead of spending your mother's money on golf clubs. You encouraged me to fudge the reports. Bradley jumped to his feet. You wanted that summer rental. You've been living like a queen on my mother's grace. And now you're acting like a stranger. The argument descended into a toxic spiral. Gillian realized the people she chose, the ones who loved her more, were only capable of love when the wine was flowing. Leo and Mia watched their parents crumble. The lesson they learned was about the absolute fragility of a life built on someone else's labor. "We'll tell the police we've been robbed," Gillian said. "We'll tell them Mom is unstable. There has to be a law." "There is a law, Gillian," Bradley said. "It's called contract law, and your mother wrote the book. Every document I signed had a morality clause. She didn't rob us, Gil. She just took back what was hers. We're the ones trespassing on a life we didn't earn." He looked at his phone. A notification from the Department of Labor his business insurance was canceled. The wind picked up howling through the Joshua trees. Gillian sat on her suitcase. She thought of her mother sitting in a quiet room, her conscience clear. Gillian realized Sheila's greatest consequence wasn't the ruin. It was the silence, the absolute refusal to participate in their drama. Sheila had stopped being a mother to a parasite. The crisp air of Vermont was a balm for a soul that had spent years breathing ungratefulness. 3 months had passed since that afternoon in the Mojave. I sat on the porch of my farmhouse. The silence felt like a reward. I had traded Manhattan for the weight of stone and timber. In the legal world, it's a clean break. Through Arthur, I received the final reports. Gillian and Bradley's attempt to paint me as a monster backfired when Arthur released the audit trail. In the court of law, facts are stubborn. The viral pity party resulted in Gillian being fired. No company wanted a daughter who tried to hijack her mother's identity. Bradley's downfall was clinical. His creditors swarmed. The dealership was liquidated to pay back taxes. He and Gillian were living in a 2-bedroom rental in Queens, navigating public transportation. Martha had fled to Florida the moment the cash ran out, leaving Gillian to realize the woman she loved more was a fair-weather friend. There were no champagne toasts, only the bitter taste of debt. I watched a hawk circle the valley. I wondered if I should feel guilty about the twins. But by removing the gold-plated facade, I had given them the truth. They were attending public school, learning that a toy is something you earn. Perhaps in the wreckage they would find their own character. My daughter sent a handwritten letter filled with pleas. I didn't finish reading it before placing it in the fireplace. Forgiveness would have been an invitation for a second betrayal. Some bridges are meant to be burned. I wasn't being cruel. I was being final. To those who see a mother who turned her back, I say this: the greatest cruelty is to allow a person to believe actions have no consequences. I didn't just save my money. I saved my dignity. The price of freedom was high, but the value of the peace I possess is beyond currency. The train was the life of entitlement I had allowed. Today, I am free. As the stars fill the Vermont sky, I am reminded that love is a bridge, not a one-way street. By giving our children everything, we rob them of strength. My journey was about the restoration of self-respect. No amount of blood relation grants the right to treat you as a resource. Justice is often found in the act of walking away. Your value does not decrease based on someone else's inability to see it. You are allowed to set boundaries. Dear friends, thank you for walking this journey with me. If this story resonated, please like and subscribe. Your engagement helps bring these lessons to light. Did Sheila go too far? Leave a comment with your opinions. Share this story with those who might need to hear it. I wish you health, happiness, and the strength to protect your inner peace. Thank you for listening. See you in the next one.